Hello, I'm Sophie, though I should mention right away that I'm using pseudonyms to protect everyone's privacy. Like many women who've lived through betrayal, I've learned the hard way that sometimes we need to guard our stories carefully. I live in a small town where I work as a teacher. A profession I've always taken pride in, despite what others might think. The people in my story need different names. My husband will be Ryan, his friend Rebecca, and my brother-in-law Cameron, who became my guardian angel when my world crumbled. You're probably wondering what my husband did that left me feeling so betrayed and angry. Trust me, the pain still catches in my throat when I think about it. I truly believed Ryan was one of the good ones, you know the type. Successful doctor, hospital director, seemingly devoted husband. We met later in life, when we both had some gray in our hair and wisdom in our hearts, and like many women who find love in their mature years, I fell completely, foolishly in love. When we married, we each had our careers. Mine in teaching, his in medicine. And while the income gap was significant, he never seemed to mind. But Rebecca was a different story altogether. To understand my nightmare, you need to know about Rebecca, though my stomach still churns when I think about her. She and Ryan had been friends since medical school, working together, sharing what seemed like every moment of their professional lives. I've never been the jealous type. Heaven knows I've had plenty of male colleagues throughout my teaching career, but something about their relationship made my skin crawl. It wasn't just her constant belittling of my profession, though that stung like vinegar in a paper cut. She was one of those women who needed to be the center of attention, always finding excuses to touch Ryan, making subtle digs at me that felt like tiny daggers. Ryan would hold me at night, whispering that I was the only one he loved, but he'd fight like a lion to keep her in our lives. The truth hit me like a thunderbolt when I became pregnant. Suddenly, all the pieces of their twisted puzzle fell into place. One day, Cameron called, his voice heavy with the weight of secrets, asking to meet at our local cafe. My heart knew something was wrong before my mind could catch up. You know that feeling when bad news is hovering like a storm cloud? I arrived at the cafe, my hands shaking despite my attempts to stay calm. My pregnant body felt heavy as I sat across from Cameron, whose face was etched with worry lines I'd never noticed before. He struggled to find the right words, his concern for my pregnancy warring with his need to tell me the truth. The world shifted beneath my feet as he revealed my husband's betrayal, the kind of betrayal that makes you question every memory, every tender moment you thought was real. I sat there, feeling like I'd been sucker punched, my mind refusing to process what my heart already knew was true. Then came the knockout blow. The affair had been going on since their residency days, a decades-long deception that made mockery of my marriage. Of course, I'd seen the signs, their too close friendship, her boundary-crossing behavior, her contempt for my career and education. I'd watched my husband defend her countless times, dismissing my concerns like I was some paranoid schoolgirl. The truth had been performing a dance right in front of my eyes, but I'd chosen to believe the lies. How many of us have done that, choosing love over instinct? Rage and disgust boiled up inside me as I confronted this reality, my husband's affair with the woman he'd sworn was just a friend. Cameron revealed more. Their relationship had supposedly ended over her infertility, but that felt like another cruel joke in this circus of deception. The revelation about Rebecca's infertility struck me like a physical blow. How many times had Ryan used that story to make me feel sympathy for her? Looking at Cameron's compassionate face, I felt a glimmer of gratitude in my sea of despair. At least someone in this mess had the decency to tell me the truth. My maternal instincts kicked into high gear as I vowed to get medical tests. If they'd tampered with my pregnancy, I'd make sure justice was served. I asked Cameron to keep our conversation secret. I needed time to plan my next moves carefully, like a chess player thinking several steps ahead. He shared my disgust at the situation, explaining how he'd wanted to tell me sooner about Rebecca. The thought of Ryan confessing only after being caught made me sick to my stomach. What kind of man does that to his pregnant wife? Cameron explained how Ryan had expected brotherly loyalty to trump morality, how tragically mistaken he'd been. My intuition screamed that there was more to uncover, so I pressed Cameron about Ryan's other plans. Like a detective piecing together a case, I needed every detail, every scrap of truth. My life and my child's life hung in the balance. This isn't just about my marriage anymore, I pleaded, my hand instinctively cradling my pregnant belly. Your future niece or nephew's entire life hangs in the balance. Please, I need to know every detail of their plans. The truth he revealed sent icy terror through my veins. They were plotting to steal my unborn child. My world spun as Cameron explained how I'd been nothing but a human incubator to Ryan, a cruel piece in his elaborate game with Rebecca's willing participation. Their master plan was laid bare: divorce me, marry her, and steal my baby to create their twisted version of a perfect family. Real, primal fear gripped me then, the kind that makes every mother's worst nightmare seem possible. Ryan wasn't just clever, he was calculating. As hospital director, he had the power to label me unstable, to paint me as an unfit mother with a few careful strokes. With his connections and deep pockets, he could hire attorneys who'd tear my life apart in court. My hands trembled as the full weight of my situation crushed down on me. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. In 24 hours, my life had transformed from a dream into a nightmare. So every kiss, every touch, every moment was orchestrated, I whispered, my voice raw with pain. He saw my trusting nature as a weakness to exploit. Cameron's face darkened with shame for his brother's actions, telling me how he'd barely restrained himself from violence when he learned the truth. Through tears, I thanked him, knowing his warning might be all that stood between me and total destruction. His words were gentle as he assured me I deserved better, urging me to fight for myself and my baby with everything I had. Summoning strength from somewhere deep inside, I promised to thwart Ryan's plans, though I admitted I couldn't do it alone. Cameron's loyalty shifted firmly to my side, his determination to see justice done burning in his eyes. We spent hours strategizing, but don't picture me as some steel-nerved warrior plotting revenge. Reality hit me in waves at that cafe, each revelation bringing fresh tears and gasps of disbelief. My pregnancy hormones amplified every emotion: rage, betrayal, fear, until I felt like I might shatter. I alternated between cursing Ryan's name and sobbing into my napkin while Cameron sat witness to my pain. When the tears finally subsided, two crystal-clear truths emerged. I needed a divorce, and Ryan would pay for his cruelty. At home, while Ryan slept the sleep of the conscienceless, I began my covert evidence gathering. His phone, never checked before in my naive trust, now became my window into their deception. My hands shook as I entered his password, knowing this moment marked the death of my last shred of trust in him. Their message history made my stomach churn with each revelation. Rebecca's impatient whining about the wait made my skin crawl. Ryan's complaints about the timeline until my C-section filled me with revulsion. She spoke of my baby as her own, their secret meetings like some twisted romance novel. He reassured her about keeping their affair hidden, protecting his precious reputation. Her jealousy of me, the unwitting surrogate in their sick game, dripped from every message. Each screenshot I captured felt like documenting a horror story. Some messages were so vile I can't bear to repeat them, but they revealed the depth of their conspiracy. Hidden between the lines were hints of other betrayals yet to come. The hospital staff's complicity in their deception cut deep, a whole community watching me play the fool. Only Cameron and one other doctor had the integrity to stand against the charade. Their eventual downfall, along with the hospital's exposure, deserves its own chapter. Most chilling was their casual discussion of declaring me mentally unfit if I dared fight for my child. Ryan's calculated evil stunned me. This stranger wearing my husband's face would stop at nothing. His power, money, and connections were weapons aimed at my heart. Days passed, and my grief over Ryan's betrayal transformed into something harder, colder. I'd married a monster in prince's clothing. Accepting this truth was like swallowing broken glass. Once I embraced reality, my focus crystallized to a single point: protecting my unborn child. The shambles of my marriage could wait, my baby couldn't. Instead of falling apart, I channeled every ounce of fear and rage into building my case. Ryan barely noticed my stoic facade as he busied himself planning his future with his mistress and choosing nursery furniture for their new home. For legal purposes, I documented everything meticulously, each piece of evidence feeling like a dagger in my heart. Sitting alone at home while knowing Ryan and Rebecca were playing happy couple somewhere felt like torture. Every day, I thanked God my pregnancy wasn't high risk. I honestly don't know how I would have survived otherwise. After enduring 2 months of this hell, I finally gave birth to my precious baby boy. The moment I held him in my arms, a fierce maternal instinct surged through me. I knew I would move heaven and earth to protect him. Ryan feigned excitement about the baby but barely acknowledged my existence. He was useless during the delivery and vanished almost immediately after our son was born, no doubt rushing to tell his precious Rebecca all about my child. When she tried to visit, I banned her from my hospital room. Ryan and I had a heated argument about it, after which he never returned to the hospital. Of course, he was waiting at home when the baby and I were discharged. After Cameron drove us home, I found Ryan and Rebecca lounging in our living room. Ryan couldn't even be bothered to pick up his wife and newborn. I asked Rebecca what she was doing here, reminding her that I'd made it clear she wasn't welcome. She responded with typical arrogance, telling me the world didn't revolve around me and she'd go wherever she pleased. I begged Ryan to make her leave. He coldly informed me that she would stay, reminding me it was his house. I pleaded with him, telling him how exhausted I was and begging him to make her leave. He refused, declaring she was his best friend and wouldn't be asked to leave. Right. And I'm just your inconvenient wife who happened to give birth to your child. I went straight to my room and called my lawyer. Even for a cheating husband, this was beyond cruel. I refused to speak to either of them again. I called my lawyer's office to say I was ready to proceed with the divorce. The lawyer contacted Ryan, and all paperwork was delivered the next day. It was enough to shake mighty Ryan's composure. He stormed into my room, demanding to know about the divorce papers. I simply nodded and informed him that from now on, all communication would need to go through my lawyer. I'm exhausted. I need rest, I added firmly. He declared that Rebecca would be staying to meet the baby, insisting she had a right to be part of his life. She's nothing to me, and she's certainly nothing to my child. Rebecca had the audacity to declare that she would be the baby's mother soon, claiming she already considered herself his mother starting that day. The confrontation in my home took me completely by surprise. I hadn't expected Ryan and Rebecca to ambush me the day I returned from the hospital. Even Cameron hadn't known about their plan. We'd both assumed they would come later. It felt like divine punishment for marrying a man like Ryan. I was literally 2 days post-delivery, exhausted from a difficult C-section. I needed complete rest to recover. Most people would show some basic human decency and delay their evil plans a few days, but not Ryan and Rebecca. I looked at Rebecca with pure disgust, telling her she was delusional if she thought she'd ever be my child's mother. She smugly insisted it was inevitable. I warned her to stop dreaming and face reality. Ryan turned to Rebecca, telling her to explain everything since I was apparently having trouble understanding. Then he revealed their cruel truth. He and Rebecca had been together all along. He explained their plan to divorce me immediately so he could move in with what he called the love of his life, taking our son with them. The audacity of this man, standing there discussing his affair while I held our newborn child. He was so completely callous that he didn't even pretend to feel remorse. My blood boiled as I listened to them casually discussing their plan to take my child. "That'll happen over my dead body, Ryan," I snarled. "How dare you stand there and talk about your affair so shamelessly?" He had the nerve to ask why there should be any problem discussing it, claiming our marriage was already over. Then he added the final insult, explaining how he'd tried to leave Rebecca but realized no one could compare to her. Rebecca chimed in with her own confession, explaining how Ryan had always loved her. She revealed that they'd only separated because of her infertility, waiting for me to give birth so she could have my child and complete their happy family. "You've made quite a few plans," I said icily, "but unfortunately, none of them will happen. You're not taking my child." I couldn't believe the audacity of these two. The affair had clearly been ongoing, and Ryan had only stayed with me to use me as an incubator. They'd known I'd conceive quickly since we'd been trying, so they'd hatched this brilliant plan to avoid the hassle of IVF or surrogacy, just wait for me to give birth and then take my baby. As this realization hit me, rage unlike anything I'd ever known surged through my entire being. I was trying so desperately to protect my children, keeping both of them away from Ryan and Rebecca. Deep in my heart, I knew I would never give up my baby, and Ryan must have sensed my determination. That's when he started to show his true colors, becoming more aggressive with each word. He looked at me with those cold eyes I'd never seen before and told me he understood I was angry about the affair, saying he was being polite about it all. He said there was no need for me to make things worse for myself. All I had to do was hand over the baby, and they would leave. My voice was steady when I told him that wasn't going to happen. "Have it your way, Sophie," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance that reminded me of my first husband back in '82. The way he demanded I hand over the baby sent chills down my spine, just like the winter wind that used to blow through my childhood home in Minnesota. He threatened to make things extremely difficult for me if I didn't comply, dangling the possibility of supervised visits like a carrot before a horse. When I asked him what he meant, my hands were trembling, but my resolve was as solid as the oak tree in my mother's backyard. That's when he revealed his master plan, telling me he had the means to take my children away forever. He boasted about declaring me mentally unstable and securing full custody, bragging about having enough money and power to make it happen. He warned me not to test him, his voice carrying the same threatening tone I'd heard too many times in my younger days from bullies who thought they could control others through fear. Ryan really thought threats were his ace in the hole, like a poker player who doesn't realize his hand is showing. He was dead serious about executing his plan to declare me mentally unstable and steal custody. It was one of the strangest things I'd ever heard in my life, right up there with the time my sister claimed she saw Elvis at the grocery store in '77. Reading their messages about their plans was one thing, but hearing those words directly from his mouth was something else entirely. I suppose he thought those words would frighten me instantly, make me beg for mercy like a scared child. Or maybe he thought I'd give up my baby, just like that, as if I were returning an unwanted Christmas sweater. Ryan was convinced his influence could move mountains, but what he didn't know was that all his efforts were as futile as trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. Something else was waiting in the wings, like a surprise ending to a mystery novel. When Ryan made his threats, I laughed, not a polite laugh, but a hysterical one that I tried to control, like trying to hold back a sneeze in church. Rebecca and Ryan stood there with their mouths hanging open, looking as confused as tourists reading a foreign menu. They clearly hadn't expected this reaction from me. Their script probably called for me to tremble in fear, not burst into laughter like I just heard the world's funniest joke. But I was laughing because they had no earthly idea what was coming their way, like storm clouds gathering on a clear day. Ryan demanded to know why I was laughing, his anger rising like mercury in a thermometer. He asked if I thought this was some kind of joke, insisting he was dead serious about the whole thing. "Oh, Ryan," I said, savoring the moment like the last bite of my grandmother's apple pie. "This is truly hilarious. I don't think you're joking at all. I'm just amazed you actually believed this plan of yours would work." He reminded me, puffing up like a peacock, that he was the hospital director and had plenty of people willing to help him. I couldn't help but smile as I told him that wouldn't work, and while he might be director now, that wouldn't last long. When he asked what I meant, his confidence starting to crack like thin ice in spring, I had my moment. "You really thought everything would go your way, didn't you, Ryan? Well, I have some news for you." I pulled out my phone and opened my email, feeling as prepared as a seasoned chess player about to call checkmate. I'd prepared everything before leaving the hospital, though I hadn't expected to execute my plan quite so soon. After discovering Ryan's affair, I'd become as careful as a squirrel storing nuts for winter, preparing for every possibility. Fortune had smiled on me, like finding the last parking spot at the mall during Christmas shopping, and all my advance planning was about to pay off. I smiled at Ryan and Rebecca, knowing exactly what was about to unfold like a well-rehearsed play. "Why don't you take a look at my phone?" I said with a smile that would have made the Mona Lisa jealous. When he asked what was on my phone, his voice wavering like a candle in the wind, I had my answer ready. I explained that with one push of a button, an email would go to hospital HR containing evidence of his affair and all their messages about their plans for me. I told them I'd just hit send, and HR would be reading it right now, adding that they'd both be fired faster than you can say unemployment. Ryan stammered that it couldn't be true, his face turning whiter than my mother's prized tablecloth. "Does this look like a joke to you, Ryan?" I forwarded all the evidence to our family and friends group chats too. "Why don't you look at all the evidence I've gathered over the past few months?" They both exclaimed in disbelief, their voices mixing together like a discordant duet. Rebecca and Ryan opened their phones to check what evidence I had, their eyes growing wide as saucers at the mountain of proof. There were phone messages and photos that Cameron had secretly taken of them together. My brother-in-law had been as reliable as a Swiss watch, keeping his promise to help in every way he could. Cameron had even managed to send recordings of Ryan confessing his evil plans. I was as prepared as a Girl Scout with a merit badge in revenge. The phones of my in-laws started ringing like church bells on Sunday morning, while friends were leaving messages in the group chat faster than autumn leaves falling from trees. Everyone was absolutely livid with Rebecca and Ryan, their anger burning like a wildfire through our social circles. My parents, who'd been in on the plan, kept their silence like seasoned poker players, but my in-laws were as shocked as if they'd been struck by lightning. Cameron and I had kept them in the dark. We'd been as cautious as cats in the rain, worried that any warning might reach Ryan's ears. Ryan's phone kept buzzing like an angry hornet's nest as more people learned the truth. I watched him scrolling through a mountain of messages from his parents, their words heavy with disappointment in their son, like a weight pressing down on his shoulders. My husband stood there, the color draining from his face like water down a drain, looking as terrified as a child caught in a lie. Rebecca was in the same state when she screamed at me, accusing me of ruining her life. I responded as cool as a December morning, telling her that she had ruined her own life, not me. That had been their brilliant plan. Rebecca and Ryan schemed to destroy me, like vultures circling their prey. But my plan, simple as a divorce filing might seem, had trumped theirs. They were completely unraveled by the fear of exposure, like a sweater coming apart at the seams. Though I hadn't even mentioned their plot to take my children, they were trembling like leaves in a storm at the mere suggestion I had evidence. I'd sent the proof to the hospital staff too, letting them see exactly what kind of schemes their director and nurse had been plotting against me. Their reputations were shattering like fine china on concrete. They both looked like they'd seen a ghost, understanding exactly what I was talking about, their faces as white as hospital sheets. I told them I had enough evidence to make their lives a living hell, speaking as calm as still water, but if they stayed away from me and my children, they'd never hear from me again. I didn't want Ryan's money, I wanted nothing from him except for him to stay away from us. It took several years, but I finally carved out a beautiful new life for myself, like a sculptor revealing the masterpiece hidden within marble. Neither Ryan nor Rebecca dare come too close to my children now, circling at a distance like wary wolves. The short version is that I'm divorced, Ryan lost his job, and Rebecca's in the same boat. Though from what I hear, they don't seem too bothered by any of it. Word has it they're married now and living in another state, like characters who exit stage left in a play. That's why I wanted to share this story with all of you. Sometimes you have to let everything go, like releasing a bird from its cage. I'd been worried about giving Ryan any chance to ruin things, but I needn't have concerned myself. In reality, everyone stood behind me like a wall of support, which became crystal clear in the family group chat. Ryan and Rebecca sat there reading message after message condemning them, each word striking like tiny arrows. While they were still processing those messages, an email arrived from the hospital board, urgent as a midnight emergency call, requesting their immediate presence at a meeting. I received an email too, the board promising to take severe action against them both, like justice swinging its mighty sword. I felt satisfied with the outcome, but Ryan and Rebecca were as furious as hornets whose nest had been disturbed. They turned on me, demanding to know how I could do this to them, warning me they would lose their jobs and might even lose their licenses. I asked Ryan if it didn't feel so nice being targeted, suggesting it was just what he deserved. Rebecca demanded to know if I wasn't ashamed of destroying my husband's career. I asked her why I should be ashamed about exposing a husband who betrayed me and tried to steal my children. She accused me of being a terrible person because he was losing his job because of me. I told her she had it backward, suggesting she open her eyes and see what people were really saying, that they thought she was the terrible one, and I agreed. I couldn't help but laugh watching Ryan and Rebecca scrambling like mice in a maze, their carefully laid plans crumbling around them. Rebecca stood there with tears in her eyes like morning dew, drowning in hateful messages from everyone, bold enough to chase a married man but too weak to face the consequences of her actions. She was completely unraveled, especially knowing her own career was hanging by a thread. Ryan finally seemed to realize he was in deep water, like a swimmer caught in a riptide, and asked me how I had found out and where I got all the information. I told him there were good people in this world, people who do the right thing, and someone had given me the information, after which I did my own investigating. He asked if I had known about the affair. I confirmed that I had known but kept quiet, like a hunter waiting for the right moment, explaining that just as he had stayed for the children, I had stayed to gather enough evidence to bring them both down. He asked, his voice trembling, if I had planned this all along, if I had known everything and planned to destroy his life. I told him that was exactly right, just as he had planned to steal my children and destroy my life. I assured him not to worry about the divorce being contentious, revealing that I'd already filed the paperwork a week ago. Like a director ending a play, I told him all he needed to do was sign and go live with the love of his life. I walked to the study like a woman with purpose, retrieved the divorce papers, and handed them to Ryan, who stared at them as if they were written in hieroglyphics. Rebecca stood there too, her face wet with tears like morning rain on a window pane. It was magnificent watching their lives crumble like a house of cards in a gentle breeze. I gave them one last smile, sweet as honey but sharp as a razor, before retreating to my bedroom and turning the key in the lock. Over the next few days, Ryan tried multiple times to engage me in conversation, though he left me alone that first night. He was too preoccupied preparing for his meeting with the hospital board, desperately searching for ways to save his job like a drowning man grasping at straws. Having friends over provided me with a buffer, keeping him somewhat at bay. The next day, though, he came to me crying and shouting about losing his job. The board hadn't just forced him to resign as director, they'd terminated him completely. Rebecca met the same fate, but their misfortunes were just beginning, like the first raindrops before a storm. Ryan was still under investigation for medical misconduct, having tried to manipulate his subordinates into falsely declaring me mentally unstable. The scandal grew like a snowball rolling downhill, destroying everything in its path. The affair had turned friends and family against them, leaving them with almost no support, like leaves scattered in the wind. My in-laws were a godsend, flying in immediately to take care of me and telling Ryan to find somewhere else to stay. I was grateful for their thoughtfulness in wanting to spare me any discomfort, like a warm blanket on a cold night. After all, it was his house too, but they didn't care about that anymore. The divorce from Ryan proceeded relatively smoothly, though he tried to fight me after his lover abandoned ship. Yes, after the scandal broke, it seemed love wasn't quite so important to Rebecca anymore. The weight of the scandal had been too heavy for her, and she tried to shift the blame to Ryan like a child pointing fingers. Her logic didn't work, but it did ensure their complete separation. Ryan attempted to halt the divorce proceedings, knowing he was losing everything like sand slipping through his fingers. No one would hire him, and the divorce would cost him half the house. I found it amusing, like watching karma in action. I didn't get everything, but I didn't care. My income was sufficient to raise my child. Ryan moved away to find new work, paying substantial child support. He has visitation rights but no custody, since he doesn't have time to visit frequently. He begged me to take him back, crying about his grave mistake, about losing his family and career for a woman who left when times got tough. But I have no regrets about him. He reaped exactly what he sowed, like a farmer harvesting his crop. 5 years have passed since then. Now, I live peacefully in a new city with my son. My teaching career is going well, and I was promoted to vice principal of the elementary school last year. Working with children every day heals my heart. Ryan feels like a distant memory now. I heard he's working as a physician in another state, barely making ends meet. Things didn't work out with Rebecca in the end. Their affair became public, and they both lost their credibility in the medical field, causing their perfect plan to self-destruct. But that's no longer important to me. Cameron is still on our side. He makes sure to visit my son once a month and is a wonderful uncle figure. Thanks to him, my son has a good male role model to look up to as he grows. Recently, I had an unexpected encounter. Mark, a colleague I met through the local board of education. He's also a single parent, and we've developed a relationship where we can share our experiences and feelings. Slowly but surely, we're growing closer. The other day, I received a letter from Ryan's parents. They wrote that they wanted to see their grandson. Honestly, I had mixed feelings, but they were the ones who supported me until the end. I decided to allow short visits, believing my son has the right to know his grandparents. I sometimes meet with Ryan's sister's family too. Her children have become good playmates for my son. I've realized that blood ties don't matter, it's love and caring that make a real family. Unlike before, I no longer feel the need to be acknowledged or loved by others. I've learned that my worth isn't determined by my relationships with others. Now, I have control over my life. It's not perfect, but there's genuine happiness. My son is growing up healthy, and he's my pride. Every time I see his smile, I'm convinced that those difficult decisions weren't wrong. Sometimes I look back on the past, but not out of nostalgia or regret. Rather, it's to confirm how much stronger I've become. Even after being betrayed and hurt, I can still move forward. That's my pride. Every time I greet a new morning, I whisper in my heart, "Thank you, Ryan. You taught me important lessons." The importance of standing on my own feet without depending on anyone, and above all, what true love really is. Now I understand. Happiness doesn't always take a glamorous form. True happiness resides in quiet, peaceful days. Yes, this is the path I've chosen. Not a story written by someone else, but one I've woven myself. To you who are reading this, if you're suffering in a similar situation right now, remember this. You have value. And you definitely have the strength to move forward. You don't need a perfect solution. Just take it one step at a time to reclaim your life. Just as I could do it, you can too.